In the turbulent shadows of the Wars of the Roses, a young girl was born into one of England's most powerful families. She would never become queen, but she would birth a dynasty. This is the story of Lady Margaret Beaufort, the mother of the Tudors, a political mastermind, and one of the most influential women in English history. Join me as I uncover the remarkable life of this extraordinary figure, a life lived on the precipice of power, defined by resilience and ultimately by triumph. Born at Bletsoe Castle in Bedfordshire in May of 1443, she was the only child of John Beaufort, the first Duke of Somerset, and Margaret Beauchamp of Bletsoe. Through her father, she was a great granddaughter of King Edward III, making her a direct descendant of the Plantagenets. This royal blood, however, was a double edged sword. It made her an incredibly valuable heiress, but also a pawn in the dangerous game of aristocratic marriage. Her father, a military commander and a cousin of Henry VI, died on the 27th of May 1444, when she was only a year old, possibly by suicide or illness. His will stipulated, in the event of no male heirs, his daughter Margaret should be his principal heir. This was an unusual, almost radical provision for the time, highlighting her immense importance from birth. Margaret's mother, Margaret Beauchamp, a powerful and well-connected woman from a wealthy gentry family, ensured that her daughter received an educating befitting her high status. We can imagine a young Margaret surrounded by books and tutors, absorbing knowledge that would later serve her well in the complex political landscape of England. Her inheritance included vast estates across England, notably in the West Country and East Anglia, making her one of the wealthiest women in the kingdom, even as a child. The mid 15th century in England was consumed by the Wars of the Roses, a bitter dynastic struggle between the houses of Lancaster and of York. Margaret, with her precious royal blood and vast inheritance, became a prime target for ambitious nobles. At just 1 year old in 1444, she was nominally placed under the wardship of William de la Pole, the Duke of Suffolk, and he quickly arranged a betrothal between her and his own son, John de la Pole. This betrothal, however, was quickly dissolved by royal intervention, as King Henry VI had other plans for this valuable heiress. Her first significant marriage came at the astonishingly young age of 6 or 7 to Edmund Tudor, the Earl of Richmond. This union was formally solemnised in 1455 when Margaret was still only 12 years old. To put that into perspective, Edmund Tudor was around 24 years old at that time, more than double Margaret's age. This was not a love match nor a consensual choice for Margaret. It was a political calculation by King Henry VI, who saw an opportunity to secure his own family's position by marrying his half-brother to a woman of such high birth and immense wealth. Edmund could not get access to Margaret's wealth until the marriage was consummated, and unfortunately for Margaret, at the age of 12, she was considered legally able to consummate her marriage and bear children. However, in practice, families would usually hold on to their daughters for a few more years just to ensure that they had properly reached puberty. But Margaret was not afforded that protection, and Edmund consummated the marriage with his child bride, impregnating her at the age of just 12. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Edmund Tudor died of plague at Carmarthen Castle in November of 1456, just a few months after their marriage had been consummated. He was only 26, and this left the 13-year-old Margaret, a pregnant widow, isolated and vulnerable amid the escalating civil war. The reality of her situation was stark. She was a young girl, barely out of childhood herself, carrying the sole heir of a man who was now dead. Heavily pregnant, she travelled to Pembroke Castle, the home of her brother-in-law, Jasper Tudor, a Lancastrian stronghold that was soon to fall under Yorkist control. It was at this castle that little Margaret endured a harrowing pregnancy. On the 28th of January 1457, she gave birth to her only child, Henry. The birth was extraordinarily difficult, likely due to her extreme youth and small stature. Margaret's confessor, John Fisher, deemed it a miracle that a baby could be born of, quote, so little a personage. Accounts suggest that she suffered severe physical damage that left her unable to have any more children, a profound consequence that shaped her life, perhaps reinforcing her conviction that this single son was a gift, a divine purpose. This singular traumatic birth would define her life's purpose, the protection and advancement of her son. Margaret had barely recovered from the birth when Jasper helped her arrange another marriage, this time to Henry Stafford, a son of the powerful Humphrey Stafford, Duke of Buckingham. The Staffords were well positioned between York and Lancaster, and in theory would be able to safeguard not only Margaret, but eventually her son. For their part, this alliance brought them great wealth. While it may seem crazy to have been negotiating a marriage for a likely traumatized teenager, in Jasper's mind, this was perhaps the best way to protect his brother's widow. And so, on the 3rd of January 1458, a 14-year-old Margaret and a roughly 23-year-old Sir Henry Stafford were married at Maxstoke Castle in Warwickshire. Though Margaret left to go live with her new husband, her son Henry continued in the care of Jasper Tudor at Pembroke Castle. Margaret and Henry Stafford's union appears to have been harmonious, despite the large age gap. Stafford was a Lancastrian, and their marriage served to further entrench Margaret within the Lancastrian cause. However, the political winds continued to shift dramatically, and in 1471, during the climactic Battle of Barnet, Henry Stafford was killed fighting for the Lancastrian side, supporting Henry VI. Margaret was once again a widow, and her son Henry Tudor was forced into exile in Brittany at the age of 14 years old, following the final Lancastrian defeat at the Battle of Tewkesbury. This was a crucial moment, the separation from her beloved son, a separation that would last for many years, forcing Margaret to rely on her wit and influence at the Yorkist court. With her son in exile, her Lancastrian connections proved increasingly dangerous under the firmly established Yorkist regime of Edward IV, and so Margaret made a shrewd and pragmatic decision. She married Thomas Stanley, Lord Stanley, in June of 1472. This marriage was absolutely pivotal. Thomas Stanley was a hugely powerful figure in the northwest of England, a northern magnate whose allegiance was often ambiguous, playing both sides of the Yorkist and Lancastrian divide. He was a keen survivor, and his family controlled vast estates and numerous retainers, giving him significant military and political clout. This alliance gave Margaret an invaluable platform for her clandestine efforts to restore her son to England. While outwardly pledging loyalty to the Yorkist kings, first Edward IV and then Richard III, Margaret used her position and her husband's influence to gather intelligence, build networks, and subtly work towards Henry's return. She was a master of discretion, maintaining a facade of loyalty while secretly corresponding with her son Henry and his supporters abroad. This required immense courage and foresight. She was treading a very fine line, and with her life, and more importantly, her son's future. Her efforts were well known to those in the know, and she was often referred to as, quote, the king's mother, even before Henry was crowned. And then the unexpected death of Edward IV on the 9th of April 1483 plunged England into another severe crisis. His young son, Edward V, was quickly sidelined, and his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, seized the throne as Richard III in June of 1483. The subsequent disappearance of the princes in the Tower, Edward V and his younger brother, Richard, the Duke of York, further destabilised the political climate and fuelled public unease, with many suspicions falling upon the new King Richard. For Margaret, however, this was her moment. With the Yorkist regime appearing increasingly tyrannical and illegitimate in the eyes of many, she saw an opportunity. She began to actively conspire against Richard III. Her most significant alliance was with Elizabeth Woodville, the widowed queen of Edward IV and mother of the disappeared princes. These two women, who were former enemies due to their Lancastrian and Yorkist loyalties, united in their shared desire to see Richard III overthrown. Their audacious plan, hatched in late 1483, was to marry Henry Tudor to Elizabeth of York, Edward IV's eldest daughter, thereby uniting the warring houses and ending the devastating conflict. This proposed marriage became a rallying cry for disaffected Yorkists and Lancastrians alike. Lady Margaret even supplied funds for Henry's attempted invasion in October of 1483, which was thwarted by bad weather. The culmination of Margaret's efforts came on the 22nd of August 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field in Leicestershire. This is when Henry Tudor, having finally raised an army and landed in England at Milford Haven on the 7th of August, faced Richard III in a decisive encounter. The fate of England hung in the balance, and crucially Margaret's husband, Thomas Stanley, and his brother, William Stanley, commanders of significant forces, delayed their commitment to Richard, observing the battle from the sidelines. And then at the critical moment, as Richard III launched a desperate charge towards Henry Tudor, the Stanleys threw their support behind Henry. Their intervention proved decisive. Richard III was killed, becoming the last English king to die in battle. And Henry Tudor, Margaret's only son, was crowned King Henry VII on the battlefield, with Richard's own crown reportedly found in a hawthorn bush. Can you imagine the profound relief, the overwhelming joy that Margaret must have felt? Years of anxiety, of secret work, of fear for her son's life had finally paid off. Her quiet determination, her strategic alliances, and her unwavering faith had placed her son on the throne of England. With her son Henry declared King of England, Margaret's influence reached its zenith. She was no longer just the mother of a claimant, but the King's mother, a title that carried immense prestige and power. Margaret's son was crowned on October the 30th, 1485, a little over 2 months after his victory at Bosworth. The choice of date was deliberate. Henry wanted to be crowned before Parliament met on November the 7th. This ensured that his authority stemmed from divine right and conquest and not from parliamentary approval, further strengthening his position, a principle Margaret herself held dear regarding her son's God-given right to the throne. The setting, of course, was the hallowed ground of Westminster Abbey, the traditional site for English coronations for centuries. This ancient edifice lent immense gravitas and historical continuity to his otherwise recent and hard-won claim. The crowning of Henry VII was a monumental step, but the new king, and perhaps even more keenly his mother, knew that true stability lay in uniting the warring houses. Their solution came just a few months after the coronation, the highly anticipated marriage of Henry VII to Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of the late King Edward IV. This pivotal union took place on January the 18th, 1486, at Westminster Abbey. It was a calculated political stroke that fulfilled a long-standing pledge and visually blended the white rose of York with the red rose of Lancaster, symbolically ending the War of Roses and establishing the Tudor Dynasty, the Tudor Rose. For Margaret, this event was as crucial as the coronation itself. It not only solidified her son's throne by integrating the Yorkist claim, but, perhaps more importantly, promised a vital continuation of the dynasty. Her hopes were richly fulfilled. The new couple quickly produced a family of healthy children, ensuring a stable Tudor succession. Their firstborn, Prince Arthur, was born in September 1486, just 8 months after the wedding, to the immense public relief and Margaret's profound joy, because he represented the seamless fusion of the two houses. He was followed by Princess Margaret, born in November 1489. She would later marry the King of Scotland and become grandmother to Mary, Queen of Scots. She was followed by Prince Henry, born in 1491, who would famously become Henry VIII. And finally, they were followed by Princess Mary, born in 1496, who had been married briefly to the King of France. These births were a source of immense pride and satisfaction for Lady Margaret, confirming the divine blessing on her son's reign and securing the future of the Tudor line that she had so fiercely brought into being. With her son firmly on the throne, Lady Margaret Beaufort's influence at court was unparalleled, a testament to her political acumen and the profound bond that she shared with Henry VII. She held a unique and powerful position as the king's mother, enjoying precedence over every other woman at court, even Queen Elizabeth of York, and often sitting just below the king himself at public ceremonies. Henry relied heavily on her counsel, frequently consulting her on matters of state, and even granting her a unique form of royal authority to issue decrees using her own signature, Margaret R. She also lived independently, often at her own estates like Collie Weston in Northamptonshire, but she was a constant and vital presence, meticulously overseeing the education of her grandchildren, advising on court protocol, and ensuring the smooth running of the royal household. And her deep piety, a lifelong characteristic, also profoundly shaped the court's moral tone, making her a formidable yet respected figure whose wisdom and unwavering support were indispensable to the stability and success of the fledgling Tudor dynasty. But Margaret's legacy extends far beyond court politics. She was a devout and highly intelligent woman who embraced her role as a patron of education and religious institutions. Her most enduring contribution is undoubtedly her patronage of Cambridge University. She refounded and endowed God's House as Christ's College in 1505, and then went on to found St John's College posthumously through her will in 1511. She also established the Lady Margaret Professorship of Divinity at both Oxford and Cambridge universities, positions that exist to this day. She was also a generous benefactor to numerous churches and religious orders, demonstrating her deep personal piety. She translated religious texts, commissioned beautifully illuminated manuscripts, such as the Hours of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and she continued to live a life guided by strong moral principles, even taking a vow of chastity in 1499, even though her husband, Lord Stanley, was still alive. However, and tragically, in February of 1503, tragedy struck the Tudor house. Queen Elizabeth of York died at the age of 37, just weeks after the death of her infant daughter Catherine. This was a devastating blow for Henry VII and left a significant void at the heart of the royal family. In this period of immense grief and vulnerability, Lady Margaret stepped fully into the role of the chief female figure in the realm, effectively becoming the leading lady of the royal court and the primary emotional and practical support for her son. She took on even greater responsibility for managing the royal household, overseeing the care and education of her grandchildren, particularly the future Henry VIII, and providing shrewd counsel to a king deeply affected by loss. Her presence ensured stability and continuity during a critical time, allowing Henry VII to focus on governance while she skillfully managed the domestic and dynastic affairs. It is in this position that Lady Margaret continued until her beloved son's death on the 21st of April, 1509. After a period of declining health, likely from tuberculosis, the king died at Richmond Palace. His death marked the end of the first Tudor king's era, a reign characterised by meticulous financial management, the restoration of order after decades of civil war, and the shrewd consolidation of power. For Lady Margaret, who had lived through the perilous journey of his exile and orchestrated his return to England, his death must have been a profound personal loss, albeit one tempered by the secure knowledge that her life's ambition had also been realised. The crown passed smoothly to his son, the future Henry VIII. Lady Margaret Beaufort died just 2 months later, on the 29th of June, 1509, at the age of 66. Her life was a testament to resilience, intellect, and an unshakable will. Her death occurred at the Dean's house in Westminster Abbey, where she had been staying following the coronation of her grandson Henry VIII. Her funeral was a grand affair, reflecting her immense status, and she was laid to rest in a magnificent tomb within Westminster Abbey, near the tomb of her son and daughter-in-law, a testament to her enduring legacy as the matriarch of England's most famous royal line. From a vulnerable heiress to the architect of a royal line, Lady Margaret Beaufort stands as a towering figure in English history, a true matriarch whose legacy continues to inspire and intrigue. She navigated the treacherous waters of the War of the Roses with remarkable skill, outmaneuvering powerful men and securing the future of her family. Without her, there would be no Tudor Dynasty, no Henry VIII, no Elizabeth I. Her strategic brilliance, her unwavering faith, and her profound dedication to her son laid the very foundations of early modern England. Thank you for joining me on this journey through her remarkable life. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into the fascinating world of history.